player of the Two Deep Zone. Mike Tanier is here after an action-packed week of news across the NFL and ahead of, mercifully, the preseason finale coming up this weekend. Michael, how are you, my man?
I'm doing great. Mercifully does not begin to describe it. And you must have seen a different week of news if you say it was really action packed. Mine had a little dribs and drabs of action, but that's okay because we've got a guest today.
We certainly do. We're going to check in with former New York Jets Director of Player Personnel, Greg Nejmeh, who's now the president of Accelerated Sports Ventures. We'll get his thoughts on the big news of the week, which is the floodgates opening between the NFL back to college football and the transfer portal. We'll make sense of all that. Greg was obviously in the room when a lot of debates happened around final cuts, which are going to be coming up this Sunday. But before we get into all that, a little bit of housekeeping. If you enjoy the podcast, please go ahead and subscribe in the Apple Podcast Store. Leave us a 5-star rating and review. We read all of the 5-star reviews on the show. You can check us out in the iHeartRadio app, Amazon Alexa, and Amazon Music. You can check us out there at Between the Hashmarks. And of course, if you enjoy Mike Tanier's unique blend of firebrand anger directed at the Cleveland Browns, deep analytic dives, superhero comparisons, seamlessly woven dad jokes, be sure to subscribe to the 2D Zone. And if you enjoy my brand of insider reporting, news, nuggets, and analysis, subscribe at betweenthehashmarks.com. Mike, it's been a wild week, and certainly I think the biggest story is this issue of the transfer portal being reopened for players who don't make an NFL roster. And I've never seen anything before like it, but it might just be the wave of the future.
It might be the wave of the future, but I'm baffled. I'm mystified. And this is something that has real consequences for fans, for teams, for us going forward in the years to come. And it's the Wild West. It's terra incognita right now. Hopefully we can make sense out of this with the help of our guest.
For sure. And I spoke with Greg Nejmeh for Friday's mailbag. If you missed that, go check it out. But even folks who did read it, they still had questions in the comments about what does this mean for the future? How are players going to navigate the cut down process? How's the NFL going to handle players who wind up taking this offer from the latest court ruling to go back to school? And I said, you know what? We'll bring Greg on. So without further ado, we're going to have our guest join us, Greg Nejmeh, former director of player personnel for the New York Jets, the current president of Accelerated Sports Ventures, and you can follow him on Instagram at Greg Nejmeh. Greg, thanks for taking some time to join us today. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Matt. Mike, appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you here, especially now, right? Because we were just talking before we went on the air. This really is the NFL storyline of the summer. It's the topic of the moment. You and I spoke briefly about it last week. But now that the dust has settled a little bit and we've seen Daquan Wright get waived by the Cleveland Browns, he lands through the transfer portal to LSU with Lane Kiffin. How do you see this playing out from the NFL side of things moving forward with players getting to go back to the portal?
Yeah, it's from the NFL lens, it's really interesting, right? I think that's the part that no one's really talking about right now. You strategically try to keep a guy on your roster, right? Because you do believe in his development and maybe it's a redshirt year for him, but you don't want to lose him back to college now, right? And so I certainly think those discussions are happening inside NFL buildings. And it's just another layer to kind of the craziness that is college football. But, you're now seeing the tentacles of that affect much more outside of college football. And so, yeah, I think there's NFL teams that are having discussions about, all right, well, we want to keep this guy on our practice squad, but we don't have a guarantee that he's going to stay anymore, and you run that risk anytime, but now there's an added layer of another opportunity for him. And so I think it'll certainly impact some decisions at the bottom of the roster.
And in this case, isn't there a possibility that the NIL money in college is greater than the practice
Sure.
squad money, in addition to the better opportunity for advancement in college?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, for sure. You're 100% right, Mike. And I think even if the money's equal, right? The players are gonna have the thought, can I go back to college and possibly improve my draft stock or go to a better situation a year from now and I'm a year more mature and all that sort of stuff, right? So even if the money's not drastically different, they may see it as a better opportunity.
And Greg, you've obviously been in this very unique position of being able to see this from both sides. Now, obviously, this wasn't a front burner issue in the NFL when you were working for the New York Jets, but now in your work with Accelerated Sports Ventures, you see it from the NIL perspective as well. Do you think that the players going back to college will really help their draft stock moving forward? Or is the NFL team and the front offices and the coaching staffs, will they then hold this against players because they didn't stick in the NFL? And because when they do enter the draft next year, now they're a year older, now they have another year of wear and tear on their bodies. How do you see that layer of the onion kind of playing out?
I don't. It's a great question. I don't think it's going to affect them too much, to be honest with you. Like, I think if they go back to college and they perform at a high level or a higher level than they did, right, and they look as though they've developed and they're another year older, like, yeah, the age will come into play to an extent in some of those decisions. But if a guy was a UDFA or a late round pick and he's now a mid round pick, I still think someone's going to take him and they're just going to say, well, he already got a taste in the NFL. He should have an idea of how he needed to improve. We saw some improvement in him physically, and in some cases it might actually make it feel like it's a little bit of a safer bet because the guy's kind of already dipped his toe in the water at the NFL level too.
But from the draft standpoint, who retains the rights in the
Yeah.
NFL?
That's a great question. I don't know that anyone's been able to like specifically say that yet. Like my thought would be, once you're cut and you're a free agent, then that takes precedent really. But I had a similar thought to that too. Like, okay, if you were drafted and you're released and you're now a free agent, you go back to college, who like there should be, I would think, if I'm an NFL team that just took a draft pick on a player,
Right.
I would want there to be some at least right of first refusal that I still can bring the player back to me if he enters the draft next year. That to me that makes sense.
Because this almost like threatens the draft to a
Yeah.
degree. You could imagine, say, first round quarterback making a maneuver like this, for example. But
Yep.
can they return if the team is still retaining their rights, or is this all just developing on the fly?
I think it's all developing on the fly. It really is. And I mean, you even saw yesterday, I think a couple of the conferences, I might have missed a little bit because I was on the road, but some conferences are now saying you can't do that. You can't bring back I think it was the Big Ten and the
The Big
SEC.
Ten. Yeah, I saw the Big
It-
Ten come out and made a statement
right.
that you can where they're not taking players who were signed to an NFL team.
Exactly. So now that's a whole other wrinkle and layer to it. And so it's just ever evolving. It doesn't, you know, the work I do now, I see it time and again, and it doesn't shock me as when we talked last week, Matt. Like
Yeah.
like I said, like this is something we should expect to happen. I just have a hard time, I have a hard time wrapping my head around somebody that was training in an NFL strength and conditioning program and developing in a system and a program. Like even if that guy's not necessarily good enough to make that NFL team, right? Like he's getting another level of development just by going against a higher level of competition and all that sort of stuff. And now he's coming back to college and gonna play. I mean, that's crazy to me. It really is.
Yeah, and I guess my big question here is this ruling came down. I guess it directly impacts something like 16 players from this year's draft class because of the eligibility rules or how COVID was handled at the college level. Is this a one summer, one and done situation in your opinion? Or do you think this is going to become the new normal where players who don't make the active roster can, request their release and jump back into the transfer portal next year, the following year, moving forward? What's kind of the timeline from your understanding?
Yeah, so if it was strictly affecting college football, I would say this is gonna happen continually. Now that it's starting to touch the NFL and NFL programs, that's where I think the guardrails will come in place. I could see the NFL protecting the draft to an extent and saying, like, if you were a draft pick or if you were signed and you choose to go back, like, you have to go back to the team that released you or, things like that, right? Because I think to Mike's point earlier, like it can lead to so many other issues if the NFL doesn't step in and at least put some guardrails around it. So they may not be able to stop what a judge rules as it relates to college football, but they can certainly be an impediment to the impact that it has on the NFL. And I would expect the league to do that.
What about the NCAA? Do they still have any jurisdiction on this, or am I thinking like it's still 2012 and they still exist?
Yeah, I don't know, honestly, Mike. I think there's so many variables now. There's different states and judges that rule on different things. There's different
Right.
conferences that have different rulings, and there's just not kind of that one true governing body, right, that has oversight over all of it. And I think that is where a lot of these inconsistencies happen. Like you had the ruling a couple weeks ago where these guys could come back, right? And that kind of opened the floodgates. Everyone started scrambling, and I was doing work for it too, try to help identify some players for the schools I work with. And then maybe 24 hours after that, it was, well, that may not be the case. And then it was, it continues to change almost daily, right? And so that's just kind of the world these colleges live in now.
And Greg, this really is the wild, wild west in college football. It's becoming the wild, wild west in the NFL. And it's just fascinating how this topic really took over the conversation. You and I spoke a couple weeks ago about you coming on and talking about cuts because you've been in the room during final roster cuts. And this now becomes the topic of the day. But I do kind of want to transition to that part of the conversation because I find it fascinating, right? We've all seen Hard Knocks. We've all seen some of those debates and some of those conversations where position coaches are lobbying for guys, but you're one of the people who's been in that room for years. So take me through what that's really like. And between the executives, the GM, the head coach, a position coach, a coordinator, what are those conversations like during final cuts? And who typically has the upper hand of the final say?
Yeah, it's a really long, arduous process. It's really a 6 to 7 week process from when training camp starts, where you're constantly evaluating your roster on a daily basis. You typically have like weekly meetings with the coaching staff where, we would, I don't know if every team does it exactly this way, but like I feel most it's pretty similar where, we would kind of like we would almost go through what the roster cuts would be each week, right? So that we kind of like had an ongoing dynamic conversation about it, right? And obviously that changes. Guys can have a couple good weeks or a couple bad weeks. Um, and then as you get to this point, it really starts to kind of crystallize. Obviously, injuries have an impact on that and everything. But as you're doing that, you're also like from a pro scouting standpoint, which, when I was the director of pro scouting, not only are you having all those discussions, but you're also canvassing and looking around the league for all other options that could potentially upgrade your roster. So then, that has another layer to it. Um, so there's a ton of discussions that happen. I think the most important thing is like to be open, honest, and transparent throughout the entire process, from the personnel standpoint to the coaching staff. Um, you're never going to agree on everything. I think the personnel staff, they or the general manager in a lot of cases typically has the final say on the 53-man roster. And I think there is some benefit to that because they have to balance winning now, but also preparing for the future. And I think in a lot of cases, coaches, as they should be, like this is not a criticism of coaches, right? But they're worried about how do we win game one and then how do we win game two, right? And so I think that's the balancing act, and that's what makes it really challenging. But I think as frequently as you can have those conversations dynamically, like really when it gets to this point, you're probably only deciding on like 2 or 3 more things.
Wow.
Most of the discussions there's a lot of consistency on, and then you get to this final week and there's a handful of final decisions that you guys need to come to agreement on.
Back in the day, it used to be 2 phases. There was
Yeah.
one set of cuts and another. Now it's only one giant cut down, and then, like you said, that scramble because some other team might have cut somebody you covet. Easier now for the front office or harder now? And then the same question for the players, which was preferable for them?
Yeah, I think it's harder now just because there's the sheer volume of having to go from 90 to 53 on your own roster. Like
Right.
you could go from 90 to 75. That kind of was like, okay, that's one step. And now you're just going from 75 to 53, right? And really, with the practice squads at 16 players, you're cutting them. You may lose one or two, but for the most part, that 75 to 53, the majority of those guys are going to be coming back, right? So I think it just helped you kind of sequence it a little bit from a scouting standpoint in terms of identifying players elsewhere. It was certainly easier because now when it goes from 90 to 53, there's that influx of players once the personnel notice comes out, right? And
Mm.
you're doing your job, you're ahead of those things and you're prepared for as much of that as you can be. But inevitably there's going to be surprises or guys that you didn't think were going to get cut. And And so you need to like kind of sort through it in real time. So I think from a personnel and a team side perspective, it's more challenging going from 90 to 53. From the player standpoint, honestly, I think it probably is too, because I think when you get clumped in with however many thousand of players that, get cut now, right? It's a little bit easier to get lost in the shuffle. When you went from
Yeah.
75 to 53, I think some of those names stand out a little bit more.
You could
Right. I
have
guess in
also
the old
signed
days,
somebody beforehand, right? Before you even
Right.
got to the next rounds
Yeah.
of cuts. So somebody
Correct.
cuts the wide receiver you have eyes on, you'll jump on him before you have to go from 75 to 53.
That's right. Exactly right.
right? And in the old days, the undrafted rookie free agent who made the first round of cuts, he sort of gets attention. He gets on radar. So if he doesn't make the second round, that's somebody who might wind up being priority for some other team. That's harder to spot, at least from
That's
a
right.
media standpoint.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, that's right. And look, teams sometimes they try to play games too. Like they don't want you to necessarily think that the guys they're holding to the 75 cut are going to be their entire practice squad. Like there might be one or two that you cut and you're like, hey, once we set our practice squad, we'd like to bring you back, right? We just need to get through this last preseason game or whatever it was, But now everything kind of gets all clumped into one, and it's a lot of names and a lot of volume.
Greg, you're now the president of Accelerated Sports Ventures. Before we get into all that, I do want to pick your brain here. In your former life in the Jets front office, what was the most difficult decision around roster cuts that you can remember being a part of? And did you win the power struggle?
Wow. There were a lot of them. Like instead of a specific one about a player, I would say that the most challenging ones, just in general, were where we just couldn't find like a consensus or a reasoning amongst the personnel and the coaching staff, right? And
hmm,
like I wouldn't say that happened frequently, but it happens probably like, maybe once a year. And it normally comes down to like your last decision, and there's support one way and there's support another way. And I think the challenging thing about those decisions is like the general manager, if he has final say, like he has to make the decision knowing that he's going to be upsetting like one side of the organization, right? And that's just not an envious position to be in. Obviously, you want it to be the right decision, right? But you have to always do what you think is best for the team, right? And people can view that different ways. So those were always the decisions that were just really challenging and took a lot of conversation and a lot of like hard conversations to really sort through. I can remember a couple of them distinctly, but just out of respect to the people involved and the players that were involved, I don't want to get into that specifically, but those were the ones that really kind of like we agonized over a lot, where we just couldn't see it the same way.
when those cuts come, like we have the saying, "Coach wants to see you. Bring
Yeah,
your playbook." Is that how it goes?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I handled our cuts for I would say probably about 10 years when I was
Okay.
there. And, at final cuts, the GM and the head coach will also see them. We want to make sure they see the position coach and the coordinator. That was just how we did things.
Right.
I don't know how it's being done now, but, I would talk to them, kind of inform them of what was going on, and then they would meet with each person. But yeah, we would tell them to come in, bring your iPad or your playbook, and it's a challenging day. Like you always want to be really super respectful of what they're going through. But I also always wanted to try to give them some feedback and some reasoning why. And I wanted them to understand the perspective. They may disagree with it, but like I felt like I owed that to them. And then I always just tried to explain, a lot of these guys are rookies, right? And they've never gone through this before. So I always tried to explain a little bit of what the process, like the next 48 to 72 hours may look like for them, like, so you're going to get cut, you're going to go on waivers. 24 hours from now, a team has an opportunity to claim you. If they do, you're on that team. If not, we may bring you back to our practice squad. If that doesn't happen, your agent will be, trying to get you workouts just so they can understand like what they have to look forward to. Cause it's kind of, it's a jolt to the system to hear that, right? And so I want them to have something to look forward to and just an understanding of what they have moving forward.
And the Jets seem like they have, if not this season, there's a brighter future to look forward to, it seems like, for the Jets in the years ahead. They've strung together a couple of really nice draft classes the last 2 years. I spoke to a couple executives after the draft back in May who said the Jets had the best haul of any team in the NFL. And you've been in that building. You're obviously familiar with how they operate. What are your reasonable expectations for the Jets going into this season?
Yeah, I think look, I've been in those positions before. Like I never want to put a win and loss expectation just because it's so
Yeah,
challenging to do
for
that.
sure.
Um, I think just setting the foundation and the like overcoming obviously last year wasn't a great year. I think they would all admit that. And I think it's really just about trying to show like legitimate progress from that, and then also just setting like the foundation moving forward for the future years to come. Like what that looks like in terms of wins and losses, I couldn't say. I think it's really more just kind of the optics of how it looks on the field and how the presentation of it looks on the field, right? I think that to me it will be really important this upcoming year, and I think it'll help, if they're able to do that, I think it'll help them moving forward for sure.
And in a perfect world, what is the long-term plan, long-term future scenario for them at quarterback? What does that look like? If you were in that building, if you were the GM, this year you're walking into a season with Geno Smith and Kate Klubnik on the roster. You have them 3 first-round picks next year. Just your view on what the ideal quarterback scenario is for the Jets beyond 2026, the future of that position.
Yeah, I think the ideal scenario is it's less about what the quarterback is. I think it's more about where the team's at, because I think a lot of these quarterbacks come into situations that they get drafted early, and obviously the team's not in a great position, right? And then, there's either, eventually a coaching change that happens, and now a young player has been. I mean, we've seen it all across the league, right? Where a young player gets drafted, and then there's a coaching change, and now they're having to deal with that. So, I think the first thing is really like establishing the progress and like we talked about of the team, and getting that to a point where they are moving in the right direction. And then, whether it's Gino, who I'm a big fan of and loved when we drafted him, or Kate Klubnik, or all those sorts of things. Those guys play at a good enough level, or there's enough pieces there to where maybe the guy that you are drafting, he doesn't have to play right away, and he can really kind of learn and grow, and then the team can continue to develop, in that third year, and it's just a much more stable situation. I think that's kind of the ideal situation overall, really. For It's more about the team being able to absorb the player than it is about what player is right for the team, in my opinion, in a lot of cases.
And you're in a really unique role in this new ventures, Accelerate Sports Ventures. Tell us about it, what you have going on, and what you guys are trying to build in this new era of NIL in college football. All kinds of sifting landscapes in terms of the NFL draft moving forward. You have these Power Five programs, you have these Power Five five-star prospects in your portfolio you're working with. Tell us about Accelerate Sports Ventures, what you're working with, and the work you guys are doing.
Yeah. So, I took the role about 5 months ago, and really what it is it's all the stuff that I did in the NFL. So it's true film-based evaluation. It's all our professional processes and discussions about roster allocation, cost replacement analysis, all those sorts of things, and really just being an extension of a staff of multiple schools and advising them and guiding them. In certain cases, it helps with additional bandwidth to help canvas for players. In other cases, it's more just being able to offer my thoughts and insights based on my 16 years of experience to these teams. College football is becoming, and it is a professional model. And I think the teams that are willing to accept that and to lean into that are going to be at an advantage. So it's been really exciting. We're working with multiple schools now. It's really rewarding because it's what I love doing, but it's rewarding because I get to see like the impact that it's having in the relationships that it's helping me build, right, with these teams and with these programs. And so I'm really excited about it.
So when a new NIL rule or court case comes, I guess you get a notification on your phone pretty
Yeah.
quickly because you have to act right away and start adjusting on the fly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that we help with, right? Is like
Uh-huh,
these rules do change. So like having as much infrastructure and as much process and preparation that you can have internally that I can help with
uh-huh.
it really helps transcend a lot of these rules and these the ever changing landscape. Like
Right.
if you trust your process and you have additional resources at your disposal, it's going to help teams deal with all those sorts of things and not react to them and be ahead of them.
Wow. Fascinating stuff, and certainly a very valuable service in today's college football landscape. Greg, tell people how they can find out more about Accelerate Sports Ventures and where they can find out more about you.
Yeah, so acceleratesportsventures.com. Our website is up and you can see everything on there. I think you mentioned my Instagram before. That's another place where I put a lot of stuff up on that you'll be able to see. Accelerate Sports Ventures has that's just as it is as their Instagram as well. So yeah, we're putting a lot of good stuff out, and it's really exciting. It's growing, and I'm fired up about it.
Greg, really appreciate you taking the time. Really value the insights, the conversation, your friendship. Thanks for joining us today. And everybody should go check out the Accelerate Sports Ventures Instagram and check out at Greg Nejmeh on Instagram as well for all your NIL, college prospects, college football information that you need in this ever changing landscape.
I appreciate you guys. You do a great job. Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate you, brother. Thanks for joining us.
Of course.
Yeah, Mike, that's really interesting stuff. And it seems like the landscape ever changing just seems to be the phrase that's echoing in my mind, that Greg is the guy who has to keep up and read and react and pass the information on to his college program clients, the players that he's dealing with. It just seems like it's a changing world by the day, big time college football, and now impacting the NFL.
Sounds like too much work for me. It just sounds like too much work for me. Like if I was in his line of work and I woke up one morning and it's like, oh, NFL players can now go back to college and into the portal, I'd cry. I would cry. It's like you think you have a handle on what the scope of this is, and now you have to like add in, well, also there might be these other 50 players who could do it, but you're not sure if they're going to be allowed to do it or not, or what the parameters of that are, or if the individual conferences are going to allow that. Like for you and I, it's a little bit of a headache here and there keeping track of who's where. Imagine if that was the job, is keeping track of who's where and being able to tell Lane Kiffin who's where, being able to tell Chip Kelly, whoever at the coaching ranks, who's where at any given time. Too much work, too hard.
I can picture you, the alert coming on your phone, and Ari Gold from Entourage, I mean, where he throws it against the wall. I can see that being you in that role. I'm not so certain that you didn't do that on Monday at about 11:15 when I'm sitting in my home office and I get the email from Two Deep Zone where you write the perfect summation to Deshaun Watson being named the starting quarterback of the Cleveland Browns. And I got to put it to you and give it to you straight here. You summed it up absolutely perfectly when you called this whole situation the perfect triangle of hatred.
The triangle of hatred. Deshaun hates the Browns, I think. He hates the fans, although he recanted some of his harshest remarks against the fans. The fans do not like him. Browns fans have long time had a love-hate relationship with the Browns that veers towards hatred. And now the Browns are very much clearly stating that they don't give a damn about their fans, and they don't really care about Deshaun either. They're amortizing him just a bad investment that they're trying to get penny stocks out of. And it's just you reach a point, because I do obviously do a lot of humor. You reach a point where the funny thing isn't funny anymore. And like the thing that kind of is also like you want to condemn it and you're just sick of that anymore. And that I've never seen an NFL organization engender this feeling of just exasperation and hopelessness and despair anymore. It's not funny. It's not funny to be mean about. It's not fun to hate watch. It's just gruesome at this point.
No, it goes beyond football too, because first
Yeah.
of all, I don't know that there's another organization in all of professional sports that is openly hostile to its fan base as the Cleveland Browns are to theirs. And from just a football perspective, you look at Deshaun Watson and all of the issues off the field and the dozens of sexual assault allegations and the fact that he was a legal nightmare away from football. He just isn't that good of a quarterback anymore to put up with all of that, to think that there's a high enough ceiling that there's any value whatsoever in playing him. Because, Mike, he's thrown 19 touchdowns to 12 interceptions in his last 19 games. I'm sorry, as an NFL starting quarterback, That's abysmal. And I know that there was the shoulder injury. I know there was the torn Achilles, but the straw that broke the camel's back for me was when he stood at the podium Saturday afternoon after being booed in Cleveland and didn't show 1 ounce of remorse. Basically, a flat out said, quote, I have no regrets about anything in my life, unquote.
Right.
Talking about football, talking about all those things, but to even have that process with everything that he's been through, the situations he put himself into, to have that kind of an attitude and to project your anger towards the fans for
Right.
voicing their anger,
Right.
I just think that Cleveland fans deserve better and the Browns organization needs to operate better. And I don't know that they're capable of doing it.
The human race deserves better. The human race deserves better than this to be like, okay, once a week on Sunday, this guy's going to be out there playing football, whether you like it or not, whether he deserves it or not, because of a cascading failure of terrible decisions, one on top of each other, perpetrated by a team run by a absolutely morally reprehensible idiot in Jimmy Haslam. The whole thing with Saturday going into Monday, this is an organization that made their decision the moment they extended his contract again in March.
Yes.
Everything they said after that was a sham. They extended his contract and they said, we're going to throw him out in the field, come hell or high water. Maybe we get some kind of return on investment. Maybe he gets injured and the problem goes away. Maybe. They have not been looking for a better solution. They did not take seriously the possibility Shador Sanders would grow into that role. They did not pursue any better options than that. And then Saturday is the culmination. They tried on Saturday to make him look good. They put him out there against the third stringers and had him throw a bunch of slot screen passes to make his stats look good. And he still not only threw an interception and a couple interception balls, but a pass that made me gasp. A pass was a pass over the middle to an open receiver that, your Jack Strands and your Tanner McKees and your undrafted rookie from Saginaw State make all the time. And he double clutched on it with his arm and it bounced forward like it was thrown by a 7-year-old. And then he goes up there and talks about being disrespected by the fans. Like this was just, it was unspeakable. And they just said, well, no, we made up our minds.
It was rock bottom. You step to the
Yeah.
podium and you see that, and then 48 hours later, he's named the starting quarterback. It's whiplash inducing, and it seems like nobody involved wants anything to do with each other. And you touched on it there. We've all seen the jersey of the fan wearing the 27
Yeah.
quarterbacks
Yeah.
that the Browns have had since 2000, right? We know the history. We know how abysmal that organization is at identifying, drafting, and developing quarterback talent. But I would argue that the past 4 years, the entire Deshaun Watson experience, from the shoulder injury, the
Mhm.
Achilles injury, to him being brought back on that contract extension in March, this is the worst chapter of it because you had all of those things happening in the ether. You knew that he was one conviction away from the commissioner's exempt list forever. You knew that the shoulder might not ever be the same again. You knew that he ruptured his ACL, and yet your best contingency options that you've had in house are a fringe NFL quarterback in Shador Sanders, who you drafted in the 5th round, didn't spend a lick of time developing very clearly, as we've seen this preseason, didn't spend any time developing over the offseason. Dylan Gabriel, who's worse, and you didn't do anything to upgrade the quarterback room in a tangible way this offseason. So I would argue that they're getting what they deserve in a Deshaun Watson who has a terribly slow reaction time and reaction time from the pocket. And I saw a video from practice the other day where there's a slant pattern in the flat and the receiver's open and Watson bounces the ball to him. Now, it's one rep in practice and things happen, but when you put that in totality with what we know about Deshaun Watson as a quarterback in 2026, what we saw from Deshaun Watson in the preseason this summer with throws like that happening in practice, it's just a terrible situation. And the fact that this is their best option, it says everything you need to know about that organization.
And this is what I was kind of talking about on Monday. It's not even fun to talk about.
No.
As we go through all of the elements of this, it's like, yeah, and this guy is not just a scumbag, but he also stinks, and the way they did it stinks, and it's all true. It's all true. And it's like I'll bet you there's people listening, watching, are like, yeah, I know all this. I know all this. And that's like the worst part. Like there's nothing to be added to this. It's like we have this compulsion because it's our job to point to it and try to contextualize it, and it's just crap, layered in crap, wrapped in crap, a crap sandwich with crap cupcakes on the side.
I just can't imagine being in that building or being Todd Monken walking into that situation. You get another head coaching job, you walk into that situation and taking a look at that quarterback room and not even trying to give yourself another option, not dipping your toe into the free agent market this offseason. You traded away Miles Garrett, so you're kind of waving the white flag there a little bit in
Yeah.
terms of what your identity was going to
Keep
be.
camping.
But like how you didn't look around and try to pull off a trade or try to move up in the draft and take somebody high in the NFL draft, even though it was a weak quarterback class. You tell me you couldn't have taken Drew Aller? You tell me you couldn't have taken Cade Klubnik? You tell me you couldn't have taken any of these rookie quarterbacks to drop into that situation that you've left yourself? Deshaun Watson, Shador Sanders, and Dylan Gabriel?
I need to get a beer. Because if we're gonna keep doing this, I can't keep drinking coffee and soda, and I know that there's other things I can't have if we're on YouTube, so I'm having a beer. This is a Tonewood Fuego from Tonewood in South Jersey. Now they drafted Taylor Green out of Arkansas, I guess 6th round, I think.
Sixth
And
round, yeah.
you haven't seen him. So you have this 4th quarterback, and if you know, like the Falcons, for example, Jack Strand, we saw their 4th quarterback. The young man Daniels, we talked about him last week for the Buccaneers. We saw him, the 4th quarterback. We've seen the Eagles' 4th quarterback, Cole Payton, over and over again. We've mysteriously never seen this kid, and the reason why, in my personal opinion, is because he could be their best option, but they can't allow that to happen. The
Yeah.
chance that this tall scrambling Joe Milton-y kind of guy from Arkansas could run around in circles, throw a couple deep bombs, and like everyone realize he's better than Watson and better than Shador, and he's like an adult, normal sized adult, unlike Gabriel. And so they couldn't put him in a preseason game except at the last drive of the 4th quarter or whatever they did. They didn't give him any like serious reps. This is the fix. This is the fix.
Yeah.
And it's like, and we're trying to do like serious analysis of this, and they're the ones playing games. They're the ones clowning around and hurting the product and hurting their own brand name and alienating and taking for granted their own fans.
For sure. And what's really troubling about all this is it might not be the worst quarterback situation in the NFL. It's up there.
Yeah,
It's bad.
it
And,
is.
and off the field, when you take in all of the issues that come along with Deshaun Watson, I don't know that the Atlanta Falcons are in position to be in a worse spot right now than the Browns are.
I I would, if they had to go out there with Cooper Rush and Jack Strand, they're in better shape than the Browns are right now, and they won't have to. But like we're starting to get news here that Michael Penix is healthy again. No, he always was healthy, but now he's really healthy. Now he's cleared by doctors, and it sounds like even though Monday was an unpadded practice, so they're out playing patty cake and playing catch, and then there was a regular practice where he split reps Tuesday with Tua, and today's Wednesday, and it could be happening right now. I'm not sure. It sounds like they're moving towards trying to get Penix to start in week 1.
Which I think is the right move. When you invest
Yeah.
that high a draft pick in Michael Penix, you kind of have to figure out what he is, and you're not going to figure out what he is by playing behind Tua Tagovailoa. And I think that Tua was always brought in as a lottery ticket for Kevin Stefanski, as a contingency plan if Penix isn't fully healthy. But if you're the Falcons, I almost think you want to see Michael Penix get this job so that you know what you need going into next year because you've already invested all this money in Bijan Robinson and Drake London and Kyle Pitts. The weapons are there. The defense is starting to add some pieces the last couple of years. The quarterback's the uncertain spot. If Penix is the guy, great. But if you're Stefanski, if you're the Falcons organization, I'll put it to you, Mike, are you comfortable with Michael Penix or Tua Tagovailoa, or do you want to see what's behind door number 2? Because I have a couple door number 2 options that I want to throw to you off the cuff here.
Well, I'll hear the door number 2 options, but if Penix is comfortable and Penix is healthy, that's fine. I wonder about Penix's comfort level. First of all, from the conversations that he had several times with the media, talking about his readiness to take a hit, like the difficulty he's had sort of coming back from a mental standpoint. Is he ready to go back out there after a couple of practices? And he might actually play this weekend. We're not sure. Is he going to be ready? If so, and he's medically cleared, you might as well. You're going to need both of them this year. So if
Yes.
he's not ready to say, well, he play Tua till unfortunately he gets hurt, which will be at some point, then you play Penix. That's fine. I'm all ears though to hear what your door's number 2 is. Please don't say JJ McCarthy.
Oh no, God no. I'm not sure JJ McCarthy leaves Minnesota. I certainly don't think the Falcons trade for him. But if I'm Ian Cunningham and I have all this infrastructure invested, two names that I think are really interesting. One, the Rams have played Stetson Bennett like a lot. They played him a lot, and it almost feels like they're showcasing Stetson Bennett because they have Ty Simpson, right? So if Stetson Bennett becomes available, do
Yeah.
you take a flyer? Either if they waive him, or do you pick up a phone and be like, yeah, hey Sean, hey guys, it's Ian. I'm going to offer you a fifth-round pick for Stetson Bennett. We want to get him in the building, bring him back to Georgia. What are we thinking here? Would you
What,
pull off that trade?
what round pick?
Sixth, fifth,
No.
somewhere in that area.
Okay. Okay. All right. 6. I'm good. I was going to get another beer. Bring him back to Georgia. I do like that element of things. Couple of things. I watched Bennett against the Saints, and the Rams.
Yeah.
He might have been the worst Rams player on the field in that game. The Rams were just steamrolling. They could hand
And they
off.
played him forever. They played him like the
Yes.
entire game. And they threw like Ty Simpson some garbage time throws late.
Right.
And it seemed like they were playing against the Saints practice squad players, right? I mean, I watched that game as well. I had to watch it on mute because they kept rotating like fan of the hour into the
Yes.
broadcast booth. So I had to
Oh,
watch it on mute.
there was some kid in there.
Yes.
There was some kid, some good go, 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 go. And I guess that's cute, but it was kind of weird that there was like a kid just saying go, 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 go. Very confusing. I didn't have it on mute, as you can tell. Um, I I think they consider Stetson Bennett their backup. I think Ty Simpson is their number 3. I think they wanted to showcase Simpson and make him look good, so they've had him out there against the third stringers. Uh, Whatever. I don't think he's that much of an upgrade over Penix and Tua. I think you're just getting another guy, and maybe there's this McVay magic, but I think the McVay magic was you're playing Saints backups and you're just running the boot pass and throwing it
Yeah.
into the flat to like Max Clare 50 times, and that's making you look good. So I don't think that's the 6th round pick, maybe, but I'm not that excited by that. What else do you have?
Ring, 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 ring.
Hello,
Hey, hey, Darren. It's Ian. How you doing?
back,
How's it looking in North Jersey?
back me up. Am I Darren Mogi?
You're Darren Mogi right now. Yes.
Oogie Moogie from. So I'm in Florham Park right now.
You're in Florham Park. Hey, Ian,
Okay.
you have that fourth round pick behind Geno Smith. We have all this money in these like star players. We're ready to roll here. We need a quarterback. How about a fourth round pick for Geno? I know you got him for like a late round pick swap. Would you trade us Geno Smith for a fourth round pick?
Why do you think Geno Smith is available, Ian? What makes you think that? He just had a perfect 7-for-7 drive for a touchdown in our last preseason game, and our backup is Cade Kerplunknik.
I'm thinking you guys are still trying to build. You could use extra draft picks. You have those 3 1s. You could have a fourth that could sweeten the pot for everything. I'm looking for veterans. If I offer you a fourth for Geno Smith, would you take that deal?
We have 7 first-round picks in the next 2 years. We're coming out of our ears in first-round picks. Geno Smith is here to make sure that Aaron Glenn doesn't lose his damn mind, and that Demario Davis and Minka Fitzpatrick don't hold a mutiny, and that we're not having to trade Garrett Wilson for even more first-round picks, maybe to you, in a couple of weeks. I'm sorry. Is this a crank call? Is this really Ian Cunningham? Is this that guy who got the phone numbers of the draft picks a couple of years ago? He was Falcons related, wasn't
It
he?
was me, yes.
I'm sorry. Geno's not getting traded.
No, but
Not getting
I just
benched.
find I just find him pointless in that situation. I just find him completely pointless to be in. But I understand Aaron Glenn is coaching for his job. I understand they need to show progress, as Greg said in our conversation, and the best way to show progress is Geno Smith. I've just always been of the thought of, okay, if I'm not going to win this year,
Yeah.
I want to best situate myself to win big in 2027, 28, 29, and moving forward. And I want to build towards that. I don't know that playing Geno builds towards that end.
What does Geno do for the Falcons though? Get them 9-8 for 1 year?
Yeah, and you can win a division at 9. You can win that particular division at 9-8, right? And you can get to the playoffs at 9-8 with the weapons that they have.
You might be able to do that with Penix and Tua though. It's another one
Yeah.
of those. Maybe if we get the broken down veteran, you have one. Or the guy who has a little bit of a spark down there, and you have that too. So it's kind of it's a hard one to restack there. Matt Ryan coming down out of the front office makes about as much sense.
Yeah, Philip Rivers at age 67 years old. Old man Rivers, bring him back.
Bring Philip Rivers back. I wouldn't be surprised. I'll give you one I was going to wrap with it. Okay, the Cowboys right now are trying to figure out their number two between Sam Howell and Joe Milton. Joe Milton is incredibly toolsy and seems to every year seem to be like, yeah, he's figured things out a little bit more, and he can run and he can throw as further than Josh Allen. Howell's out there. He's tough. He's competitive. He's kind of gets sacked 150 times if he actually plays. The the person who loses that battle, first of all, is better than anyone the Browns.
Yeah.
And secondly, if they were brought into the mix there, and it's like, look, we know we're going to need a third quarterback because both of these guys are injury prone, and maybe it's Milton because he can run and fly, or maybe it's
Lots of upside. People in the league seem to love him. Very intriguing
yeah,
player.
yeah. Then do something like that. I could see them making kind of a move like that. That guy might end up just being Jack Strand at this point. We've got this dude from nowhere state who looks good against the fourth string, and if we're not going anywhere with our third quarterback, let's give him an evaluation.
Best case scenario, I still think, and you sound like you agree too, is Michael Penix. And then you kind of look around at how these cuts shake out and what veterans are available in the trade market. I mean, Tanner McKee is another one. If you offer a draft pick, who knows? Although I don't think the Eagles are intent on moving off of him.
No.
But one of the big stories of the week is one of the more
Oh, God.
interesting stories of the week.
I apologize for putting this on the outline. I apologize, but I think we had to touch on it.
You have to touch on Jed York's arrest. The circumstances surrounding it are not ideal. The reporting is that he was arrested soliciting a prostitute in a trailer park in East Palestine, Ohio. Correct?
Yeah, yeah. This sounds like the kind of thing that comes across the Facebook. Like you have like a cousin or like an old friend or a sister-in-law or something posting vaguely about something terrible that happened, and then when you look into it, you find out it's something like this, where
Yes.
yeah, where one of our demographic of older, not 500
Well,
million.
my dad or my uncle sends me a text message of a screenshot of a Facebook post that said, "Is this real?" Right? Like
Is this
that.
is this
That.
right, right? Or he's sending it. I went to college with this guy. Won't
Yeah.
believe you won't believe what he did. And like, or wasn't this that guy that you got in that fight with in the bar? It's like, oh my god. Yeah. So he was on some. What's everybody has heard the details.
Yeah.
What's the weirdest detail for you?
It's got to be the setting, right? It's got to be the $160 in a trailer park. And listen, I am not going to,
No,
besmirch sex workers or, put them, throw them under the bus or crack jokes about sex work.
no.
But like Jet, Jet York's net worth is $500 million.
Yeah, yeah.
Before we factor in the San Francisco 49ers as an asset, his personal net worth is $500 million. And you're trolling a trailer park like at 4 in the morning or whatever it was. Like,
Well,
what is happening here?
see, that's the thing. The specificity of the dollar figure. Forgive me, I live a sheltered life. I assumed everything would have been in multiples of 100, 200, 300. I would have thought that that's how that kind of thing worked, so to speak. I didn't know that you could go down and granulate things in terms of 20s and stuff like that. Not, but what gets me is it wasn't 4 in the morning. It was like 9:30 in the morning on a Sunday.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the detail of it where like it's just like, 9:30 in the morning on Sunday. Maybe you're going to church. Maybe you're getting ready for your NFL games. I'm having coffee. I'm taking a walk. I might be going to a farmer's market, and this individual is so eager to have a tryst with a prostitute that he's pinging the hell out of undercover police officers,
Right.
pinging the daylights out of them, like, come on, where are you? Where are you? Uh, because he needs very badly at 9:30 in the morning to get this sort of release, so to speak.
So to
I,
speak, yes.
it's it's hilarious, but it's gross. It's outside of our comfort zone, I think, to a degree. Like I don't do these kind of jokes.
No, but you know who's going to do those kind of jokes?
Everyone.
Uh, Mike Evans and George Kittle and Brock Purdy and the 49ers players at their lockers, right? That's the extent. I've had somebody like on social media ask me like, what's the impact going to be from a football standpoint and on the field? I think the impact from a football standpoint is like in the locker room when these guys are shooting the shit with each other on a Tuesday afternoon. The
Yeah.
jokes are going to be cracked about the owner, or maybe he walks by the locker room and it's like, least I'm not that guy, you know?
Right,
Like, I
that's
think that's the extent of how this like plays with the players.
it's that at least I'm not that guy energy. I
Yes.
I look at the story, I was like, "Well, at least I'm not that guy." He's got $500 million, he owns a team, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, "Well, yeah, but I don't have to run around 9:30 in the morning saying, "Quick, get me to the trailer park out of Route 130, because I just have to get this so badly." But Fred Warner said, "Oh, we're not talking about this in the locker room." And what I think is happening is, first of all the young guys, and we just talked to somebody who's in charge of cutting young guys, they're not saying nothing.
No.
Not in the locker room, not
No.
at this point. And a lot of the older guys are probably looking at each other and kinda nodding, and it's just like, "Just lay low, just let it go." But you better when they're whispering, when they're in the group chat, when they can't be overheard by Kyle Shanahan or somebody like that, they've got strong opinions on this
Yes.
genius move by the guy who writes their checks. Do you think this has any football impact whatsoever?
No. I mean, I don't even know what it would be because I don't even
Right,
know if you're Roger Goodell. Do you even like investigate this further? What kind of disciplinary action do you take against an owner for something like this? It
right,
it does. I think the extent of the impact is the locker room fodder, or like when the offensive linemen go out to dinner at the steakhouse and they're away
yeah,
from the facility and away from the transformer, that they'll joke about this like over sirloins. You know what I mean? I feel like that's the extent of this. I don't even know that it's a distraction. It's just
no.
kind of what these guys are going to like be talking about and gossiping about for a few weeks.
Right, it's not even somebody they see on a day-to-day basis, and York can hide from them for weeks at a time. He is the owner. He's up on a different office, etcetera. A couple of things, by the way, in the chat. Jeff says, "Love the Tonewood Fuego." Jeff is seeing me drink a Tonewood Fuego for the first time, I think. And he also asks, "Is Eli Stowers, the tight end from Vanderbilt, a bust for the Eagles?" I- I'm not going to say bust, but I was not a huge fan of Stowers. He cannot block. He's never
Yeah.
blocked, and that's a problem.
It feels like a future slot tight end type of situation. If they can't decide who the number three wide receiver is going to be long term, that Stowers could be that pass catcher type of situation. But I think the blocking holds him back. I'm not ready to write off a tight end, a draft pick, a player as a bust before he plays an NFL game, right? But
Right.
from what I'm hearing in camp, it hasn't been great.
It hasn't been great. That kind of player where it is "Oh, he's such a great receiving tight end." So many of them disappear into the ether because the
Yeah.
moment that they can't block regularly and we start talking about, "Well, we can use them as a slot." That's what slot guys are for. That's great if you're Mike Gesicki level talent where you can actually do that. You're probably not as good as the slot receiver. I mean, the good side of this is I've heard Johnny Munt, who the veteran, can block in the past has blocked his butt off in his past stop, like absolute pure blocker. I haven't seen much of him. I think the buzz out of camp is that he's been the blocker they expected him to be. Put him out there, solve the running game issues to a degree, get somebody
Yeah.
better than Craig Calcaterra in that role. He can catch the little short, goofy tight end pass and maybe turn upfield for some yardage. Hopefully for Eagles fans, and we're based in Philly, of course, and there's Eagles stuff behind us. So I don't know why I'm trying to couch all of this. Oh, for Eagles fans, but not for us. Munt becomes that guy. Stowers becomes somebody that, yeah, you stash on the practice squad. Maybe you see some more life out of him later in the season, et cetera.
And what's interesting is that a lot of these judgments are being made off of what we've seen from Sellers in preseason games. And I had an executive tell me in Monday's column, quote, joint practices are where the team
Yeah.
building results are seen and the preseason games are for back of roster competition, unquote. And this is the
Mhm.
point in the show where like we kind of talk about what we're looking forward to in the week ahead, what games we have eyes on, what players we want to see. You're at the point now where it's week 3 of the preseason. This used to be the dress rehearsal game in a 4-week preseason where you'd see
Yeah.
the starters play into the third quarter. You might game plan just a little bit more than your basic, like, base offense install periods that you put out there in preseason games. But joint practices are where it's at this point. And I think, I was thinking a lot about this week. I think it's time for the NFL to really, and I think that the appetite might finally be there to change the way the preseason is presented.
Let's hear it, please.
So I did some digging on this. Mike, did you know that teams generated a combined $4.1 billion in total ticket revenue last season? So that works out to $128 million per team just in ticket revenue. The tickets of like full season ticket plans, what have
Mm.
you. So when I look at this, and you have coaches and executives going off record with me, telling me we don't really give a damn about the preseason, and you're seeing, Jameis Winston play 3 quarters in the preseason. You're seeing Stetson Bennett play three
Yeah.
quarters in the preseason. You're seeing Devontae Adams with a baseball hat on for entire preseason games. Like the starters aren't even getting work out there in these games, right?
Right.
It feels like at that amount of revenue, it feels like the timing should be right for teams to strip the preseason games from
Hmm.
season ticket plans, and
Hmm.
you should allow your season ticket holders to have to opt in to the preseason games at a lower rate, whether it's 25% off or 50% off, whatever. Sometimes like a season ticket holder might like toss the preseason game to like a brother or a cousin or the dude who cuts your lawn as a gift. So you might want those tickets to like give away as like, hey, little Johnny's never been to a game. Hey, here's 2 preseason tickets to Ravens versus Jets. Whatever. Take them to the stadium, have a great time. But slash the ticket prices, number one, and then I would say whatever goes unsold, donate those tickets to like local boys and girls clubs or local Pop Warner football teams and cheerleading teams so you can get kids to go to games where your coaches are telling you you're not going to see Jalen Hurts, you're not going to see Roma Dunze, you're not going to see Justin Jefferson. Like slash the ticket prices and involve like youth charities to get them in the building to get a taste of what an NFL game and experience is really like. At that revenue level, $128 million per year just in tickets, I feel like you can afford to cut some losses here on preseason games that you don't even care about.
Jeff points out the preseason tickets are a reduced price nowadays, but you're still required to buy them. So it's not
Yeah.
like so they sell them at a cut rate, and then they probably just increase the price of the regular season ticket, et cetera, et cetera. So your plan involves the teams making a little bit less money, is what you're saying.
Yeah, which was why it'll never happen.
Right. I don't even understand the words you're saying right now. So you're saying that that the team would actually have less money based on what you're suggesting.
Right, but at the same time, I think it would be one of those things where like fans and fan bases, there wouldn't be so much anger about the preseason. Like I sense this groundswell
Yeah.
on the socials of people are just fed up with preseason football. Somebody on Blue Sky was like, the joint practices have ruined the preseason, and to an extent, I guess kind of they have in terms of watching the games. But I feel like in endearing the goodwill and getting kids into the stadium who like might buy a jersey or a cap or spend money on merchandise that you're not getting by a season ticket holder who goes to 18 games a year. He's not walking in and buying his like brand new Eagles jersey week 1 of the preseason. Like you,
Right.
you might be able to make up the revenue in other ways. I just feel like there's going to be a tipping point here of oversaturation. And I'd rather, if I were the league, get ahead of some of that.
Yeah, the NFL solution for this will be to reduce the preseason to 2 games and the season to 18 games,
Yeah.
because there will be no solution that involves making less money. But I thought, and we talk about joint practices. We talk about how valuable they are, how they might be even more interesting for fans. One way to look at this is to say the preseason games are now going to be just not going to be games anymore. It's going to be a joint practice. It will be held at 7 o'clock at the stadium between the two teams, or it'll be at the facility, and you can put up enough bleachers for several thousand people at these facilities. And your season ticket gets you a ticket to that. Okay. So if you're a season ticket holder, that's your preseason ticket, and that's what you go and get. So you do get to watch ones versus ones.
For
And
sure.
and you've been to a couple of these practices. A lot of times they do a keep score on the scoreboard. Like, oh, this team won this drill, this team
Yes.
won that drill, and put some little thing like that in there so that the fans can walk away. So if the Eagles were playing the Patriots in a preseason in a joint practice, all those ones up there with AJ Brown going against Quinyon Mitchell and things like that, and they're keeping a score on the scoreboard, fans would like that. Fans would come away feeling satisfied. If that happened at Foxborough, at what do you call it, Gillette Stadium, et cetera, et cetera, it would be more satisfactory at least than a game itself. But it requires a mindset change, and one of the big things that I think would happen with this is right holders like ESPN and Fox, which showed a game. If you tried to turn around and tell them we're showing a joint practice, but we want you to air some of them at prime time, they would look at you like this is unsellable.
And they probably, the league and the teams would probably not allow you to watch those full team 11 on 11 Quinyon Mitchell versus AJ Brown full team drills,
Right.
because the whole reason that coaches have gone to this mentality, you saw it this week with the Cardinals and the Packers with Matt LaFleur and Mike LaFleur. Matt was asked if he was worried about the practice tape leaking, and he said, no, that's my brother. He wouldn't do that to me. The whole reason that these joint practices are so valuable for coaches and front offices is what you put on tape in a preseason game, all 32 teams get to see that. So they're seeing, you can't hide the fourth round wide receiver who you're high on, you're hoping you can sneak onto the practice squad. You can't hide him if you run him in a game. You can't hide your scheme that you're running in a practice where you're kind of game planning against the Eagles, game planning against the Patriots. You can't hide those things in a game setting, but when you're in a joint practice, the only two teams to get access to the Packers and the Cardinals practice film are the Packers and the Cardinals. So I don't know that there'd even be an appetite for the teams to put it out there on TV. So it's really a whole mess that there's no real easy solution for.
Matt LaFleur really trusts his brother that much. I don't trust my brother that much. Does Matt LaFleur think for a second that if Sean McVay
Yeah, right.
asked for that,
His
who's
brother
like
from another mother.
his brother from another mother, if the Shanahans ask for that kind of thing, it's gone. It's gone.
Yeah,
I guess the only come away from that is like, what are they going to see that they haven't seen from the LaFleurs in the past?
right.
Um, but you're right. That's another obstacle there, where it's like, oh, we don't want all this information getting out at that level. By the way, Jeff is giving us a lot of information on the chat right now. Eagles preseason games, $44 for a preseason game, $305 for the same Washington game in section 136. But
Wow.
there's a
Yeah,
shell game at work there. There's a
yeah.
shell game at work. It's like, oh, look, we deep discounted it for you, but we're just charging you more the other way. And then the playoff tickets go up. Um, I don't know if there's a solution for the fan. But like what I would like as a reporter is I'd like to be able to see more of the joint practice. I don't
Yeah.
care if you shut down 11s, which is silly because as a reporter I can see the 11s anyway, and show me the one-on-ones, show me the pit, show me
Yeah.
the receivers going down the field, etc. And I think a lot of fans would watch. You don't have to do anything schematic if you do a fan joint practice. If you just have the 1-versus-1 cornerback versus receiver going up and down the field, the quarterback throwing the ball, the fans who show up for that are going to show up for that. And they're going to have fun with it.
And a lot of fans would watch it. Mike, what's coming up on the Two Deep Zone?
Oh, well, I have to cover a lot of the things that happened this week, which is almost nothing. Uh, seriously, other than Deshaun Watson, not a lot happened this week. But I got some updates on the Commanders. They've got another 32-year-old. That's very exciting.
This is
Uh,
becoming parody. It's becoming a parody. The 32-year-old Commanders. Just put
I
the number
love
32. Put a 32 up on the side of the helmet. On every helmet.
Yeah, yes, we retired the number 32 for whatever reason. Was that Darrell Green? Was Darrell Green 32? I
I think he
don't
was
know.
28, but I could be wrong.
He was 28. That's correct. Well, they also signed a 28-year-old, which is interesting. But I sort of love hate when I do a gag and it becomes reality, because I started doing the 32 gag 2 weeks ago, and they've committed to the bit. So that's happening. I got more Giant statistics. I screwed the Giant statistics up last week. Long story short, there's a column coming tomorrow. It's not that great. Please read it though. Subscribe if you're not a subscriber. It's not that great, but better columns are coming. Matt, what do you have coming up?
Got the mailbag on Friday. Submit your questions at Matt Lombardo on Blue Sky, at Matt Lombardo NFL on Threads. You can email them to me by replying to the podcast email that came out to people today. I'll pose those questions. NFL executives, scouts, coaches get their answers for you on Friday. 4 downs on Monday, and we'll basically be recapping some of the big moves of cut down day. We'll have some fun hypotheticals out there. Make sure you subscribe to Between the Hashmarks so that you don't miss any of that.
Awesome. I think I'm going to do a mailbag next week. That's the
Awesome.
yeah.
Awesome.
Right. We'll have
That's great.
we'll have some cuts information, some other information, and we're ready for week 1 right now. So if you guys have questions, we'll talk about them. But if you don't, we'll be like waiting for week 1 with you and watching some college football and getting down the shore one more time.
Absolutely. He's Mike Tanier. Make sure you follow him on Blue Sky at Mike Tanier. Subscribe to the Two Deep Zone. It is mandatory reading each and every week. You can subscribe it Between the Hashmarks as well. And if you enjoy the podcast, please go ahead and subscribe in the Apple Podcast Store, on Amazon Music, and your Alexa app, iHeartRadio. Leave us those 5-star ratings and reviews in the Apple Podcast Store. They help grow the show, and we read them each and every week. And he's Mike Tanier. I'm Matt Lombardo. We're going to talk to you next week, same time, same place, right here on the Between the Hashmarks podcast.